And next, are you looking for relationship advice? What about tips for trouble sleeping? Or maybe you feel like you've been holding yourself back. Well, thanks to a new podcast from the Washington Post, your answers could be at your fingertips there. The Try This podcast sets out to give listeners digestible tips for everyday problems. And I'm joined by journalist Cristina Quinn, friend of the show, former staffer here, joining me now. And of course, a very familiar face. Talk to me about this podcast.
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, you sort of summed it up perfectly. The whole idea is that, well, basically, there's just a lot of noise out there, right?
Yeah.
And there's just so much, just like information being just sort of like thrown at us all the time, and like, wellness stuff and like how to do this and how to do that. And really the goal of this podcast is to just cut through the noise and get to just like the science-backed, research-backed stuff that can really help people sort of live their, sort of like live their best selves. But, in snackable, like little episodes. So our episodes range between like 8 and 13 minutes long. So you can really sort of walk away from each episode, we call them each class, with an actual like toolkit to just like, oh, I can actually I can use these tips and put them into action right away tonight, tomorrow, or whatever. And it feels like it's just like it's low stakes, low pressure, but you feel sort of, emboldened. And so that's the goal of Try This. And actually, with our sleep one, actually our sleep expert, Lisa Strauss, is based right here in Boston.
Oh, wow.
And so she's amazing. She's an amazing sleep therapist. And she writes a great column for the Washington Post about sleep habits. And she really strikes the right tone in terms of cutting through the noise and giving you the advice that you need. And she's just been a really great source for the show.
Well, let me ask you, what do you find are the #1 questions that people want answered?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have trouble sort of falling asleep, right? Just sort of like, at the end of a long day, you get into bed and then you're just like, oh, but I got to do this and I got to do that. And sort of that list just keeps piling up. So our first episode dives right into that. And Lisa talks about performance anxiety. And she frames it as like, oh, people have performance anxiety about sleep. And I was like, wow, that really registered with me because I've had issues with my own sleep my entire adult life. And so having been able to sort of be part of this course and building the course and also experiencing and trying out all the things that she has suggested has been really a game changer for me. So I feel like I can sort of, attest to that on a personal level. But yeah, falling asleep. And so she talks about sort of like a lot of anxiety reducing techniques because so much of, trouble sleeping has to do with minimizing one's anxiety. So performance anxiety, focuses on that. But she also really emphasizes how sleep is a bodily function, which is also sort of something that I had never thought of. I hadn't thought about sleep framed that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like sleep is a bodily function. Yes. I mean, you can take that another direction, but the whole idea is that it's out of our control.
Okay.
And so when you sort of relinquish that and you're sort of like, okay, it's out of my control, you don't have to beat yourself up over it after all. You know what I mean? You don't have to keep stressing out about it. You're like, okay, it's not going to come now, but it will come. And it's sort of just like taking the pressure off of you. And that's really what we want to accomplish with this first course about sleep. Other questions include, oh, how do I fall back asleep in the middle of the night, which is a real pain, right? Like we've all been there. It's like, oh, I fell asleep. And then you wake up at like 2:30. You're like, so it's like, what do I do? And, a lot of great techniques that she gets into. And she really spells out why. And the why of it has to do with, for example, this is how she says the limitation of the human mind is that we can't entertain more than one narrative at once. Oh. And so the idea there is to sort of, let's actually take advantage of that, our limitation as humans, and try to distract ourselves with something that's really soothing. And so we get into soothing distractions and sort of like how to set that self up earlier in the day to help yourself out at night. And other techniques that were really...
You tried them yourself.
I've done them myself. Yes, yes. I feel like sort of like Cy Sperling, Hair Club for Men. And I'm like, I am not only I'm not the president, but I'm not only the host. I'm also, a client of my own work. But yeah, of the work that we did on the show, it's just been really helpful. So, yes.
Do you find that you have all of these tips? You can now go to the Christmas parties or holiday parties and go, I have all of these tips, guys.
Yeah, I do. I do feel like I'm like well equipped now. And the fact that when I go to bed, I'm not stressing about sleep. And it really has transformed my own relationship with sleep. And, a couple of colleagues who I've worked with closely on this, they've also shared this sentiment. We're like, oh, I'm not stressed out about sleep anymore. And it's because of this course that we're doing on Try This. So that, I think, speaks volumes.
I love it. I can't wait for all my problems to be solved by your show.
I'm here to help, Crystal. That's it.
Cristina Quinn, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.